Everyone can see my screen. It should say Managing Risks, Actions, and Decisions in Smartsheet by Echo Consulting. My name is Molly Yanis. I'm the founder of Echo, and I am excited that you are here today to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is risk management and proactive management, and how we can use a special tool called a CRAID Log in Smartsheet to really empower your teams. So I just want to give a really quick intro. So Echo Consulting, project management that fits. We play at that intersection between people, process, and technology and really focus on transformations for growing teams. We talk a lot about increasing transparency, improving accountability, removing friction by the right blend of process, people, technology, scaling, automate, and really developing solutions that fit the organizational culture and the growth goals of teams. So with that being said, again, my name is Molly Yanis. I'm the founder and a solution architect here at Echo Consulting. I'm also a Smartsheet nerd, so I'm looking forward to the conversation today. I'm going to just dive right in. So some of the challenges that we're going to be talking about today are lack of visibility and accountability, especially associated with action items and issues and risks that are identified potentially through meetings or IMs or chats or other places. We're going to be talking about some of those communication gaps when there's multiple documents, multiple different platforms that people have to be able to keep track of everything going on. We're going to talk a little bit about inefficient meetings and how this can really help meetings be more actionable and more focused on a collaborative decision making instead of just used as a report out or info share because we don't have all of our information in one place in an easily accessible way. And then we're going to talk a little bit about reactive issue management and really trying to be more proactive and identifying risks earlier, really spending time with the team to ideate on what things could go wrong instead of waiting for them to go wrong. So to get started, I'm just going to do a couple quick definitions, and then I'm going to dive right into Smartsheet to really spend the most of our time in developing a solution for tracking. So change management. So this is the idea that there's a process associated with leading the people side of change. So what I mean is that it's not just setting up a tool. It's not just setting up a process. It's getting people to adopt it. And there is a whole other practice on change management. So what I like to do, again, as a self-proclaimed project manager with a change management interest, when I talk about project management, it's a framework of knowledge, skills, tools, techniques, right, to meet the project goal. And when we think about a project, it's that temporary endeavor when you're trying to get from point A to point B, you're trying to get from current state to future state. Change management is that people side of it. So really that adoption, training, getting people on board. When we talk about risk management, it's identifying, evaluating, preventing, mitigating risks. Some people consider risks to, you know what I mean, be changes to scope, schedule, budget, similar to changes and change management, but it's something that can impact the outcome of a project. If you are a more traditionally trained project management or operations manager, you might know that there are positive and negative risks. There's something that could go right and there's something that could go wrong. And we want to be aware of what those things are so that we can have plans about how to address them when they happen. Again, a more traditional project management approach includes a risk register as well as an issue log. So these are two different deliverables, assets, etc., that project managers oftentimes use to capture all of the risks as well as all of the issues. Risks being something before they happen, issues being something that is currently actively happening. And again, issues most typically are described as problems that are going to potentially delay the project, mess up the budget, reduce scope, etc. Right? So a very typical term here is called RAID. So this is an idea of a place to capture risks, actions, issues, and decisions. So this is something that we're seeing a lot of when we develop PMOs for clients, when we work with them in terms of providing better visibility across their different projects. Is it's not just the project schedule, the project plan, and the project goals and business case, but actually an ongoing way of tracking risks that are coming up, actions, issues, issues, and decisions. With Echo, one of the things that we do is we actually recommend that we use RAID oftentimes instead of just notes. Notes being something that are relatively static, something that is a one-time backup, instead focusing it on what are the actions that were identified and who owns them, what are the risks that some of the team members have potentially indicated, or what decisions are we trying to make in this meeting. So how do we guide people away from using meetings only as a way to provide information because the tools don't have the information in an easily accessible way, and instead use meeting time to collaborate, make decisions, areas where it's not as easy to do potentially asynchronously with a tool. So we're going to talk about some of those tools today. With Echo, we've actually, it's actually one of our clients that we were implementing this for did this. We were talking about RAID, but they didn't have a change management system set up for them. The only thing they could do is track budget changes, but they didn't have changes to scope or requirements. They didn't have changes to potentially resources or the schedule that had been agreed to. And so what we started to do was actually tracking meeting notes, the risks, actions that came out of meetings, potentially changes, as well as issues, right? So, and that's where this CRAID log terminology was really born, which is a single source of record for things that happen in meetings. Maybe it was an action that was assigned to someone that wasn't in the meeting that needs to be followed up on. Maybe it was a question that needed to be asked. Maybe there was a change requested in terms of a new resource that needed to be brought on. So the idea was to create a single source of record for all of these different, what we call ad hoc requests and things that came up over the course of a project. One of the major questions that we get is, what's the difference between a task in a project plan and what you would capture on a CRAID log? And this is a great question. So when we talk about a project plan or a task list or whatever you end up using, a product board, Kanban board, etc., typically we're talking about scope, features, deliverables, milestones in order to reach your goal, right? Like a higher level goal. So you're really kind of providing that guidance over the course. But when you're in a meeting and you have to question one person on something, it doesn't necessarily fit within this guideline of the project schedule. These are the types of things that we want to capture in a more ad hoc way. And that's where this CRAID log comes in. We're going to talk a little bit about Smartsheet and how we use the CRAID log from a PMO standpoint versus from an operational management standpoint in just a moment when we go into Smartsheet. But do understand that we have implemented this from clients from anywhere from small startup teams of like 5 people all the way up to Fortune 100 teams that really have a robust multi-level 4 different PMOs within their IT organization, right? So this concept is not something that's specific to big companies. This concept is something that can be used and immediately implemented for teams of all sizes to provide better visibility and a more proactive approach to identifying risks and changes in an organization. Great question. So CRAID is a combination of RAID, standing for risk, action, issue, and decision, and it adds change to the front. So changes. So it can identify the changes in a project, risks, action, issues, and decisions. Thank you. We didn't talk a lot about in the beginning about etiquette. I love questions. We ended up on Teams, so you guys can technically raise your hand and interrupt and or provide comments. I do have a couple members of my team here that are going to be monitoring chat and interrupting me. I talk fast and a lot, so it'll be good to have someone monitoring and saying, hey, there's a great question. So RAID, we represent something that's called CRAID, which includes also the change requests. CRAID versus change request, there's the question right there. The C stands for the change. All right, so when we talk about a change request, some organizations that are more mature, more formal, et cetera, they do have a change management process. Oftentimes the change management process is identified for budget changes, right? Request for an adjustment of the budget. But changes can happen across multiple different areas, right? So it's not just change. It can be the scope of the project. It can be a change in a resource. It can be a change in the schedule based on some new deliverable. So it's really important is to be able to track all of the changes so that they're known instead of only the changes that might go ahead and trigger a actual change to the budget or something that might need a more formal oversight by other organizations or other teams within your organization. So again, if you already have a change request process, that is fine. Oftentimes there's a multi-step, process for updating a change request, which might be a deliverable for budget. But oftentimes they get missed until we're already in that process and or they're located somewhere else outside of the project and you kind of lose track of them. And so by using the CRAID, you have an all-in-one place to manage that. And we can actually show how you can link them to other systems as well. So again, this is kind of a streamlined visibility standpoint. When I talk about that change process, right, what I oftentimes talk to teams about is that oftentimes a change request actually is related, right, to a risk or an issue that came about. So the reason that we don't like having a separate risk register versus an issue register versus a change log, right, is because a risk sometimes becomes an issue, right? Or an issue can get downgraded to a risk. Or a risk could turn into a change, which once approved means that the risk goes away. So in some cases, you're creating a risk and relating it to a change. Sometimes the risk becomes an issue or a change. So the type of item that it is changes over the course of the life cycle. So when we think about these, we identify new risks, we identify new requirements, we identify new stakeholders or new team members, we evaluate how it's going to impact the project, and then we're communicating and adjusting that, right? So this CRAID process and including this in a single place can help us. Other things that come out of oftentimes meetings. So if you think about a typical meeting notes, you might have the high level agenda, you might have some notes just about what was talked about. But with that being said, a lot of times now meetings can be recorded, meetings can be transcribed like this one. So what is the real value of meeting notes? And what I want to be very clear about is what you really want to get from a meeting, what a really effective meeting is heading out with a clear understanding of what the open action items are, what the decisions that were made are, who made those decisions, who owns those action items, what is that next checkpoint? So when we use CRAID internally at Echo and when we train teams on how to use CRAID instead of meeting notes, what we're actually doing is saying that this CRAID log is something that actually can be opened up at the beginning of a meeting and said, hey, here are the only open action items, here are the different components that are late or something like that. And at the end, to sum up, being like, this is what we took from this meeting. Does everyone agree? Right? So it's all in one place. Issues, events that are currently occurring, as I mentioned, definition, risk versus issue, right? Ideally, risks are things that are potential that are identified beforehand, but issues can pop up unexpectedly, right? So one of the things that we like to say in our risk register, we have a whole nother webinar actually on risk management. So I don't want to go too deep here, but one of our favorite tips is to do a pre-mortem. So instead of taking the approach of this is how this is going to work, how, moving forward, instead take a moment in meetings and ask teams to identify why this plan is not going to work, why this strategy or why this decision is not likely going to work, and really pushing your team to identify the risks to this path forward. And then finally, a decision log and understanding who made that decision. Oftentimes we get to the end of a meeting, we might have some decisions we made, but did we have the right stakeholders there? Do we have a decision owner, as in a person that is authorized and says, like, this is my decision, I'm owning this? Even if that decision changes at a later time, having that record of when that decision was made, who owned that decision is really critical and has provided a lot of visibility for our teams. And one of the great things I'm going to show you about Smartsheet, right, is the ability to see cell history. And that can really help us understand when the decision was made, how many times it's been changed, et cetera. Now, with that, let's get going with Smartsheet and let's actually pull up Smartsheet and talk a little bit about what I include in a CRAID log and what you can do with it in Smartsheet past just as a data source, okay? So I'm going to attempt to get out of here and get right into Smartsheet. And you should be able to see my Smartsheet environment if I can just get a heads up, a thumbs up, or someone telling me, yes, you can see. Okay, great. I see a hand. Okay, great. So I'm just gonna pull up an example of a CRAID log, and I'm gonna actually just try to make this a little bit bigger because all right, so when I think of a typical CRAID log, I'm actually capturing a lot of the information I would in an action item or a risk or issue, et cetera. So the first thing that I do is I'm identifying what the CRAID type is. And in Smartsheet, I do that as a drop down so that it can go ahead and be standardized data. So I'm just going to look here. I'm going to start from an example, but I'm going to walk you through the different columns that we create. So the first one is you can go ahead and if you right click, you can edit the column properties and you'll see that I am going to add the values that I have here. So the change, action, issue, risk, decision, backlog. I am restricting this list to only include these. So people can't add something that's not in here. And I'm not allowing people to have multiple values per cell. I'm going to talk a little bit about the dashboard and why I do it this way. But for right now, it's a drop-down list and I can choose action, risk, change, or another concept. The next piece is that I include status. Now, Smartsheet has some out-of-the-box statuses. I'm again using a drop-down list for this. So Smartsheet will have something that's like in progress or closed. Additional components that we like to add at Smartsheet at Echo. So we typically show a new status. We have an on hold status, in progress, closed, and it looks like we've also added a backlog option as well. And then we also use a concept of priority. I want to call out a couple of quick tips on priority. So Smartsheet has a couple of different ways that they can do Smartsheet, do priority. So one option, and I'm just going to do this as an example, is to go ahead and use symbols. And if you use symbols, right, you can use priority here, like an exclamation point, or you can use arrows to show different priorities here, which is fine. What we do at Echo usually is we actually have priorities and have numbers associated with them. And this is for easy filtering and or sorting by numbers. So if you look at ours, we typically do like critical, high, medium, and low. And what we recommend when we work with teams is that we actually go ahead and update what each of those means for here. So in this edit column description field, I can go ahead and actually put some notes about what each of these means to my organization. So when you work with Echo, we have definitions for these that you can kind of start with and then tailor to your specific organization. We do that for health, we do that for statuses and things like that as well. But you'll see just kind of an example of us providing a column description for what these different priorities mean. We typically include a short description and a long description. So this is the name. It's really important. You'll see that if you, it's not super easy to see, but do you see how this is kind of a little bit darker? It's almost like it's bolded. That's because this is the primary column. So I don't know where everyone is in their Smartsheet maturity in terms of understanding the tool, but this is a primary column. And so this is the name, and the primary column should always be something that is unique for each row or for each item. So this is the name of the CRAID item. You'll see that I skipped over escalated. Escalated is one of the things that we use in a workflow where we want to show specific items to the next level up. So maybe you have a CRAID log that is specific to a project or specific to a team or a department or an organization. But maybe you want only the escalated ones to show up to, for example, senior leadership or management or someone outside of the team, like a program manager. So at Echo, we can certainly do a report out to show, for example, only the high priority items. But another way to do it is to allow a project manager or a manager of a department to go ahead and select which ones are escalated. And when you select which ones are escalated, you have a couple of different options, right? You can go ahead and create an automation to notify potentially someone. So whether it's a manager or something like that. But it also allows you to, so see there's an escalation notification, for example. When it changes to checked, a certain person gets notified. And so that's one option. The other piece is that it could just show up on a dashboard for someone is another option. Assigned to, this is a critical field. Next steps, mitigation, plan, resolution. So if you think about a risk register, oftentimes you're trying to understand what the mitigation steps are. Due date. There's other additional fields that we're looking. So when a risk becomes an issue, requested decision date, who recorded the information, and then there's some additional quantifications that we use in terms of how big of a deal is this going to be if it happens, if it's a risk or something like that. So this is the grid format. Not everyone likes the grid format, which is totally fine. What we oftentimes do is we go ahead and we create a form. And the form is actually how people submit it. So if I come here, I'm just going to give an example of a form. And here would be, instead of having people go into a grid to add new risks or issues or concerns, they actually have a form that is available to them. And so you can select who the reporter is, or you can have them put in their email address for who's submitting it. You can say who the CRAID type is, right? What the status is. And this is another one, and you can go ahead and submit this, right? And then there's some additional fields. If you're not used to the form functionality in Smartsheet, you have the ability to make different fields either hidden or required. You have different fields in terms of logic, right? So you can have a logic of even showing up or not showing up or something along those lines. And then you also have some additional visibility, like additional options to make something multi-text. You can go ahead and add some default values. There's a lot more you can do with forms, but oftentimes this is easier to get people to fill out if they're not comfortable with a grid-like format. Okay. Don't save. I'm not going to save this for right now. So these are just some of the high level columns that we look at for data for this. And then there's some additional options as well. So one of the things that I like to do, right, is I like to go ahead and add some filters here. I like to use some conditional formatting to indicate like what's late, what's high priority, health and everything like that. So RPN is talking about a risk priority calculation. So there's different calculations for risks. The other piece is that there can be different columns for different types. So what I'm going to do now is I have an example of a single CRAID log that I created, right? But what I want to show you is actually how Echo does it, which is we go ahead and we can create different CRAID logs either by different projects or by different teams within an organization or organizations. And then what we do is we actually go ahead and roll it up into a dashboard. And the dashboard is actually like where people start with it. So let me just show you a really high level demo of a dashboard that we created as an example. And in the dashboard, what I'm seeing is some quick references. So how many open items do I have? How many are escalated currently? How many are past due? This is pulling from my different CRAID logs, so I could have 8 or 10 of these. And like how many are critical risks? I can kind of see how many for each organization. I can see the different types. And then you can see here that on a dashboard, I can actually go ahead and have the forms embedded right here. In addition to that, I have kind of some of the reports and everything. So CRAID items that have been closed in the last 7 days, et cetera. So if I wanted to just visualize, right, the open items across, I could do that. The other option is, and this is how, again, when we talk about the PMO implementation and how we do that, let me just pull up, let's see here. Right? So within a project, you might have a CRAID log, and in a project dashboard, right, you might be able to see not only the task items, but also the CRAID items here. So if you think about risks, issues, things like that, they would show up there. So let me just bring it back. So you can see the total past due tasks in a project plan, but you can also see the total past due CRAID items here. And let me just go ahead and show one other visual I want to show from a PMO standpoint. I have it right over here. So as you can see, I have a lot of different options in Smartsheet, right? But let me go here and pull open the portfolio dashboard. So I've got a project status dashboard that I just showed, and in a, nope, not this one. Sorry, guys. In the portfolio dashboard or the PMO dashboard that we like to show as an example, you can see that I can actually escalate up to a different component. So if you've been in Smartsheet for a while, you might have noticed that they have recently updated their search functionality to be far more powerful. So let me just show you really quickly. So I like to navigate via search, Amazon generation or whatever you want to call it. So I search for PMO. I'm going to get some quick results right here, right? If I click on more results, they just added this new functionality. And now I can go ahead and narrow it down. So I know that I'm looking for PMO, but I also know that I'm looking for dashboard. But instead, if I wanted to look at a sheet or a row or a folder or a workspace, see how they have some different options? I can even search conversations and sheet summary now. So a lot of new options here. I can even look at attachments. So if you haven't seen Smartsheet's new search functionality, I highly recommend that you look at it. Additionally, you have the ability to see like if you've modified it recently, and you also have the ability to kind of identify which folder you want to look in. So I'm just going to go ahead for right now and just look at a dashboard because I know that I'm looking for a dashboard. And they even provided that nice little icon here to make it easier for you. And so here you can see that we created kind of an organizational CRAID dashboard. What's nice about that is with some of our clients, what we've done is we've actually created CRAID logs for lots of different departments. Sorry, guys, this is a client specific one, so I'm going to go on from that one. And what we did, right, is each different program or project or something like that has that, and then you can have one form, and then depending on which one it goes into each different CRAID log. So let me go try one more time, and then I will give up and go back to my presentation. But more results, I'm going to go to a dashboard here. Nope, still looking at a client specific one. So I'm gonna fall back onto my presentation, guys, and then circle back around on some Smartsheet questions. All right, so in addition to changes, risks, issues, action items, and decisions, there's a couple of other types that we sometimes use with clients. So one is an assumption. Assumptions come in especially handy for projects with complex requirements. Oftentimes these are longer term projects, so that we can call out assumptions. The other ones are dependencies. So oftentimes if there are multiple projects that are dependent on each other, we use cross-project dependencies to call out. We also look at backlog. So depending on how you're doing your requirements management or feature management, we can create a backlog item on here, and then also questions or something. So oftentimes if there's something in a meeting, it gets parking lotted, for example, there's a question that's unknown, we identify the question. So some organizations prefer to just call a question an action item. Other people like to call out separate between an action, which is a known entity of what needs to be completed, versus something that's an unknown entity. Okay. So I'm going to go back into Smartsheet in just a second, but before I do, I want to highlight. So the idea of the CRAID log is a single source of truth to improve visibility across the organization of risks, issues, action items, decisions, and changes if there's not a change management process in place that includes things especially other than budget. Because a lot of organizations do have some sort of change review process for budget items, but oftentimes they lack change management for resourcing, for scheduling, for scope items and things like that, especially if they don't have a robust requirements management process. Really, the goal of using a CRAID for meetings specifically is to have it be more focused, have it be more actionable, and improve accountability, and that the action item is assigned to someone, that the decision is marked with a decision maker. And then also, one of the things that we've really found amazing with Smartsheet is the ability for the project team members to actually own their own items and update themselves instead of constantly being pinged by a project manager or a manager or a senior leader for a status update. So having that single point of visibility and having a team member be able to see their own items is really important. I believe everyone on this call is probably already familiar with Smartsheet. If not, we have a lot of different webinars on Smartsheet best practices, setting up PMOs in Smartsheet. Smartsheet considers itself a work management platform. And really, when we're using it for CRAID, like we are using it as a system of record, right, with the tools. So aligning and activating the entire enterprise. So very much aligned with Echo's own goals of increasing transparency, increasing accountability, and removing friction from day-to-day work. Echo does offer a Smartsheet implementation package, and we honestly do a lot with Smartsheet implementations, all the way from super small initial consults, all the way up through building out multi-year huge PMO implementations, as well as really setting up Smartsheet as a work management system across the organization. I'm going to dive back into Smartsheet to get some of your questions and to go a little bit deeper on some of the automations and some of the workflows we use with CRAID. But before I do that, I will mention that we are having some upcoming webinars. You can go ahead and subscribe to YouTube, etc. We are constantly providing new content on Smartsheet, as well as project management, risk management, work management, productivity hacks, and all that other good stuff. Okay. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to take a quick breath. Melissa, do we have any questions at this point?
Nope, no questions in the chat.
Alrighty, so I'm going to go back, guys, to Smartsheet, and I'm going to come back to our CRAID Log example, and I'm going to walk through a couple of automations that we like to do in CRAID Logs to help them be more actionable. So I'm going to go back into Echo Demos. You see here I have my different workspaces. I've created a workspace called Demo Webinars, and in there I have my different assets. So you'll see that I have CRAID Logs, and I've created 2, but I can create more than 2. I can create as many of these as I want. I'm going to go back into our operations CRAID Log example, and then from here I'm just going to walk through some of the automations that we like to use with CRAID Logs, okay? So I already walked through the form, right? The next step is to talk about some of the automations, and we have some basic automations that we include with most of our CRAID logs. So the first thing is that we want to go ahead and notify if the assigned to changes. So we want to make sure that if we assigned the CRAID item, so we assign an action item, if we assign a decision or something to someone, that the person that is the assigned to actually get notified. So if I come in here, I'm just going to walk you through. It's a pretty basic automation in Smartsheet. So we call it the assigned to notification. The assigned to changes to any value. We have the workflow running when triggered. You can also do this daily or weekly. So if you use this very frequently, we actually recommend you do kind of a daily digest. We will show you that every individual can kind of set up their own notifications in Smartsheet. So it's not like if you set this up to trigger that people don't have the power to turn it off. They do as an individual. And then we go ahead and alert someone. And when you go ahead and alert someone in this case, you have a couple of different options, right? So you have the option to send it to a specific person, where I'm actually including like an email of a person. So this is what we do when we go ahead and notify if something was escalated. Oftentimes we include a specific person that gets notified. But here we're going to send to a contact in a cell. And what that means is we're going to select a specific column that has a contact in it that we notify. So if you see here, I have 3 different options. You'll notice that these are all contact columns. So this is important. You can only send to a contact that is a contact column. So these are my 3 contact columns. I could notify the assigned to, I can notify the reporter, the person that submitted it, or created by. This is important. So for Echo, created by is a system column. So that's a column that if they are logged in, Smartsheet is capturing who that user is and marking who the created by is. If they're not logged in, and we like to publish forms so that people that maybe aren't project managers don't have to necessarily be logged in order to be able to add something, they won't be able to see who the created by is. So that's why we typically include a reporter column. This depends on your organization on if you want them to be able to log in, like have to log in order to do this, or if you want to open this up to people that maybe aren't in Smartsheet day to day. The reporter column is really important if you struggle with visibility in terms of people submit something and then they never get a status request or they never get a status update. You never know what the status is and things like that. So it is important to have the reporter. The other piece we've noticed is that sometimes a manager or a VP or like depending on your organization, what levels you have, will tell someone else to log something. So the other reason that we find this is useful is that the reporter can actually be the person that notified. So even if a project manager maybe is the one that writes it in and it shows created by that, but the reporter is someone that's different. So again, that's another reason why we do it that way. What we've done here is we have customized what the message is. So what we've done is we've created a subject, CRAID item has been assigned to you, and we have added a field from the actual CRAID item to include that. So in this case, we've done category, but pretty much any column that you have can be added here. So I could, for example, say description, right? And what that's going to do in the notification is it's actually going to pull through in the subject line of an email or a notification that comes through, right? So anytime you're using these double brackets, see how it's listed here? It will end up pulling through in this. Now, the only thing I'll mention with this is oftentimes I don't include the description in here if it is a situation where they're going to get multiple requests at the same time because it won't bundle them together. The other piece is like when you're sending a notification, you can just you can choose which columns come across in that notification. So you can say message only, you can say all of the sheet fields, or you can only give them specific fields. What's nice about the specific fields is it basically acts like a form. So if I get the notification either in Smartsheet or an email, I can just update the information right from there instead of having to go back to the grid. So I oftentimes will go in here and pick specific columns that I want to do. Some of this is not as important, right? So like a CRAID ID or something like that, if you're not using the unique identifier much, you might not need to put that here. And there's some information that maybe you don't want them to go ahead and update. So here we go. So that's an example of an assigned to. The other thing is so this is the reporter notification that I mentioned, right? So if something was marked as closed, notifying the reporter. So that's an example. If someone changes assigned to, they notify the person that's assigned to. If there's a due date approaching, so this is something that a lot of organizations that are first adopting this really like, and then they kind of do away with it as they get more comfortable and people are in the system more often, is a due date approaching. So an update request allows them to, again, update that information directly from their email or for their notification or direct them to check on something. Usually it is, what it looks for is, in this case, it's saying every day. And at 5 a.m., it's going to check, but it's not every day that you get a notification about every item. It's only if the due date is in the next 2 days, right? So it's saying every day it's going to check. So it's triggered every single day. It's going to check to see which items are due in the next 2 days. And the status is not closed. So this is really important because a lot of organizations have started using these notifications and then they just become completely overwhelming and no one actually sees them or uses them effectively. And then it really it really decreases adoption. So make sure that you're identifying how many days before the due date you want to notify them. And make sure that you are keeping track of what the status is because no one wants to get notified of a due date approaching for something that's on hold or closed or backlog. It'll undermine kind of the system experience. And then you're alerting someone, so you're sending it to contacts in the cell. In this case, you're sending it to assigned to, almost due, CRAID item, and then it tells you what they are. And again, the ability to hear. For the attachment and the comment, I want to show you the comment functionality because we use that oftentimes if we're looking for an update on a CRAID item and we're managing it there. So let me go ahead, walk through the automations really quickly. Escalation, there's a new assign to that doesn't have a person. We also use a record date status, so we want to know what date it was closed. We can see that in the cell history, but we can actually use a record date functionality to record a date. So I have a column that says close date. When the status changes to closed, they go ahead and record a date in the close date, whatever that date that closed. So that's a way to kind of keep track of additional information. Any questions at this point? So one of the things I like to do, especially with like due date, for example, is if I right click, I can view cell history. When I view cell history, I can see at what time, sorry, 1 second. I can see at what time and who updated this information. So if the due date switches out for a week or for a month or multiple times, you can see who updated that and when they updated it. Okay. Was there one other thing I wanted to show really quick? I think that was it. I think that was like the primary piece I wanted to talk about. So there's the automations. You can mark something as escalated. You can add a long and a short description. I oftentimes recommend that. For our more mature organizations and clients that we work with, we do a lot more with like rating and prioritization. We oftentimes have multiple reviews, especially for changes. So if you want to build out a more robust change process, you can actually go ahead and, for example, from this CRAID log, notify finance if there's a change request and there's other components. The other piece I wanted to mention was that you can go ahead and request an update. So if you're not familiar with Smartsheet, you have the ability to add an attachment here. So if you have a document that you need to reference, you can. You can also add a comment and you can mention someone. So for example, at Kelly or at Kiefer, because he's here, so he knows I'm going to ping him. Can I, you know what I mean? Can I please get an update, right? Now, this is me asking him and he can kind of go back and forth with me in a conversation. The other way to do this is I can go ahead and set a reminder, or I can go ahead and actually send an update request. So before in the automations, I was showing you how to set it up so that it's triggered by the system on a regular basis. But as a project manager or as a manager, I can actually go ahead and send an update request at any time. I can CC myself and I can go ahead and schedule the delivery and decide what columns that I want them to update and things like that. Does that make sense to everyone? So this is a manual way to do an update request other than a system. At Echo, we typically do ahead, by mentioning. And when you get mentioned, you get these notifications up top here. And if I have a request, so like your sheet, a due date is approaching, for example, or I have been assigned an Echo RAID item here. So I can see that my team member, Pete, has assigned one. So let me see what it says here, right? So from Echo CRAID Log, I can see the CRAID idea, I can see what the next steps are, and I can see some additional information here. Okay, if I wanted to, I can open up CRAID from here, which is right to that row. I can also go down here and I can see where the notification is, and I can update my notification settings, including unsubscribe if I wanted to. Okay. All right, I went pretty fast because we started a couple minutes late because of the technical difficulties. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Again, my name is Molly Yanis, founder of Echo Consulting. We're a project management solutions company. We are Smartsheet aligned partners and have found great adoption with our clients of the Smartsheet system. A lot of organizations are familiar with the sheet grid-like comments. There is the ability to also view it in a board view. We've had a lot of really great traction with automating workflows that were previously had to be manually emailed back and forth. We are huge proponents of using CRAID logs to make meetings more effective, more meaningful, more actionable, and really providing an all-in-one, all-inclusive tool to manage what we call those ad hoc requests, whether they're coming from meetings, whether they're coming from IMs, really tracking across the board risks, issues, action items, decisions, changes, and then definitely if you're looking for a more robust solution in terms of like assumptions, questions, and things like that as well. There's 4 minutes left. Do I have any questions? Anything anyone wants me to cover one more time? This recording will be available. We do send out the deck that will be available to you. If you are on our YouTube channel, it does help us if you subscribe, and you will also get notified of new videos on Smartsheet. You can go ahead and just subscribe to that playlist if you would like. If you are interested in learning more about Echo Consulting Services, we will send out the information on that. You can schedule an initial complimentary meeting with us. In addition to that, we have some blogs and things like that. So if you want to subscribe, you'll have that option. We will send out a quick survey to see if this webinar was useful to you, as well as to get your ideas on the next content that we can provide here at Echo. At Echo, our goals are learn, share, grow, care. So we absolutely love to share our knowledge with other teams. One of the really powerful things about Smartsheet is that it is a very flexible, low code, no code solution. So we love working with champions that can really build out solutions on their own. We can provide them that initial data structure and that initial foundation from which they can scale their solution on. We call it landing and expanding. So we come in, we help you guys get Smartsheet really working for your organization, not just like an Excel on steroids, but a full solution that brings in your people, your process, brings in a new technology as a way to really elevate what you can deliver for value in your organization, and then teach you how to use the tool to continue to expand that value proposition. Quiet crowd today. Well, thank you for joining us, whether it was for lunch or dinner or any time in between breakfast. We enjoyed your time today, and we will send out that recording, that deck. Please don't hesitate to reach out with questions. We look forward to hearing from you. Have a good one, everyone.